Hey everyone, so in today's lesson we are going to be learning about dividing decimal numbers. So go ahead and pull out your notebooks and turn to your table of contents. Once you have turned to your table of contents, we're going to scroll down to concept 4 and write down the name, which is dividing decimal numbers, and remember that my page number is different from yours. Once you've done that, please turn to a blank page. So I already went ahead and got started ahead of time. So once again, put your title. Alright, so the first thing I want you guys to write down is 3 ways you will see division problems. So we're going to get into fraction land pretty much in their next lesson. But before we get into fraction land, I really need you guys to understand how division problems look like. They look pretty similar, but they're different in the ways. So the first one, this looks like a fraction, which essentially that's what division is. We're dividing a numerator with its denominator. And so in this case, it just means that they're both decimals. So that means that we're going to be taking 2.1 and dividing it into 46.5. And this is the traditional way that you guys seen it in 5th grade. You've also seen it this way, where it's just horizontally like this, 46.58 divided by 2.1. Remember that we have our greatest number outside, which is when we have an integer, a whole number given to us, retrieving back. And so these are 3 ways you usually see division problems. Now, when we are actually dividing decimal numbers, I put it into 4 steps so you guys can easily visualize this. First thing that you guys need to know before we get into those steps is what is a divisor and what is a dividend. So I used the same examples that I used above. And so right here on my right hand side, I have 46.58. That's my dividend. That's the number that is being essentially just divided from. And 2.1 is a divisor, so it's the number that you're dividing from as well. And so when you put it into long division form, the divisor goes outside and the dividend goes inside. So I'm dividing this into that. And that's what it looks like, 2.1 divided by 46.58. First step, and go ahead if you need to pause the video. Pause the video now so you can write this down. Step 1, you're going to move the decimal point in the divisor, so the number you're dividing by, to the right end of the divisor. So all I'm doing is I'm going to take this decimal point of 2.1, so I'm moving it once so I can easily just have a whole number there. And that's what I did. I just moved it once. So now I'm going to have 21 divided by this fun stuff right here. Step number 2, let me make this closer. Move the decimal point in the dividend the same number of spaces as a divisor. So how many spaces did I move here? Once. And that's exactly what you're going to do in my dividend. So instead of being 46.58, we're going to have 465.8. And that's exactly what I did. I just moved it one space. So I moved 1 decimal point over. And then step 3, sorry for not having the colors. I just read it really quickly. Step 3, you're going to move the decimal point up to the quotient, which is your answer. So all I'm doing is just moving that decimal point up. And step 4, we're going to use long division, and we are going to solve. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and solve this problem here. So like I said, the first thing I did was I moved my decimal point up, so I know exactly where my decimal point is going to be. So now let's take a look at 21. So I have 21. How many times would that go into, let's say, 46? Let's make our life easier. So we'll take 46 here. So how many times does 21 go into 46? And I can say, well, 21 plus 21 will give me 42, and that's twice. So I can say 2. So 2 times 21 will give me 42. And I'm just going to subtract this. 46 minus 42 will just give me 4. Right, so by the rules of long division, I can take this number and I can just bring it down. That would give me 5. Right, same idea. How many times does 21 go into 42? like I said, 21 plus 21 is 45. So 21 plus 21 gives me 42. So that means I can place a 2 there. 21 times 2 gives me 42. 45 minus 42 will just give me 3. So at this point, 21 can go into 3. So at this point, we're going to have to put our decimal point here, which is there. And what we're going to do now is we're going to bring down that 8. By bringing down that 8, now we have 38 here. So now we can say, okay, well, how many times does 21 go into 38? Well, it can go in once, but it can go in twice. So that means we can just go in once. 21 times 1 will give me 21. Let's go ahead and just subtract that. And 38 minus 21, that would just give me 17. So now we're stuck. We're like, oh man, like nothing goes into 21 and 17. But remember, after our decimal point, there's always those zeros. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to bring down this 0 right here. And that's valid. It's totally valid. So now I need to figure out, well, how many times does 21 go into 170? That's actually 8 times. 21 times 8 will give me 168. And now you're going to continue seeing like, oh, there's a pattern. Like it's going to continue on and on. This isn't a really great like decimal point example only because it has a repeating pattern. So I'll stop it after the next number that we get. So we have a 2 because 170 minus 168 gives me a 2. So once again, I'm just going to bring down that 0. So we're still stuck at some point because we're like, how many times does 21 go into 20? And what you're thinking is 0. Well, that's true. 0 times. So I'm just going to write a 0. 0 times 21, well, that's just going to give me 0. And we're going to subtract that. 20 minus 0 will just give me 20. And it's going to keep going and on and on and on and on. And so I'm just going to stop it here. But if you want your official answer, and we'll say we're rounded to the hundredths place. So we rounded to the hundredths place. So that means this is my hundredths place. We'll just say that our answer is going to be 22.18. Now, if you guys don't believe me, you can always use your handy dandy calculator. So we got 465.8 divided by 21. Our answer is 22.18095. So if we continued on our long division, we eventually will get all these numbers. But for now, just so we would save space in our page, that would be our answer. Now, if you guys can turn to a new page, we're going to start a couple of practice problems. So we have a problem right here. 1.7 divided by 16. Right? Cool. Here's one thing. That 16 is a whole number, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the decimal point and a 0. Remember, whenever we have a whole number, we can always put that decimal point and a 0. And so let's move our decimal point on our divisor once, so that way we can have a whole number. And because we moved it once, that means that we got to move it once in our dividend. So my new problem that I'm working with here, so this is basically going to convert to 17 divided by 160. So let's continue on. How many times does 17 go into 160? Because 17 can't go into 16, so we'll talk about 160 here. And that will actually be 9 times. Because 17 times 9 will just give me 153. 160 minus 153 would just give me 7. So we're still stuck in a situation where like, oh, well, 17 can't go into 7. So don't be afraid of actually putting your decimal point here and a 0. I forgot to put the decimal point once we put it here. So now we have our decimal point there. So now we have a 0. So now how many times does 17 go into 70? And that would be 4 times, because 17 times 4 is 68. 70 minus 68 would just give me 2. We're still stuck in the same situation. So let's plug in another 0. Okay, so now we have 20. Right, so this one's straightforward. 17 into 20. Well, I know that goes in once. That would leave me with 17. Now 20 minus 17 will leave me with 3. And let's just continue on with that same pattern here. how many times does 17 go into 30? Well, we can't go in twice because that would give me 34. So we can go in once. 1 times 17 would just give me 17. 30 minus 17 would just give me 13. And at this point, it's just going to be a repeating pattern. So in order to avoid the inedible, we'll just turn it into the hundreds place. So we'll round it to the hundreds place, meaning that this number won't change my hundreds. So my answer is going to be 9.41. And if you use a calculator, we'll say 160 divided by 17. It says 9.4117. So eventually we would get all these numbers if we continued on the long division. Let's do another practice problem. So problem number 2 is 0.2 divided by 4.6. Right, so we're going to move our decimal point over once. So that means that we're going to move this decimal point over once as well. So now that means that this is going to turn into 2 divided by 46. So this one's going to be pretty straightforward. It's not too bad because we're working with 2 whole numbers. So how many times is 2 going to 4? Well, that goes in twice. 2 times 2, that would give me 4. That would just give me 0. So I can just bring down that 6. Notice that I don't have any decimals, so this is going to be a really nice answer here. Because I don't have any decimals, I don't have to do anything. Or plug in a decimal point here. So now I have a 6 and a 2. So how many times is 2 going to 6? I know it goes in 3 times. 3 times 2 will just give me 6. Perfect. There's no remainder or anything. There's no decimal. So my whole number, my answer is just going to be 23. This one just worked out really nicely. And we'll do one more together. Question number 3, we'll say 15 divided by 2.6. Okay. This one's a little bit different because we actually have a whole number on our divisor and our dividend is a decimal point. And that's totally fine. We can still work with this. We don't have to change anything on the left side, nor do we have to change anything on the inside. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to place our decimal right above there. By placing that decimal, I need to figure out, okay, well, how many times does 15 go into 2? Ooh, nothing goes into there. So now let's think about 26 as a whole number. And so what we're going to do is, okay, well, I know that I can have 1 right here because 1 times 15 will just give me 15. Because 1 times 2 will give me 30, and that's way too big. Okay, so we're just going to subtract this. What I want you guys to do is just imagine that decimal point is not there, so we're just going to subtract 26 minus 15, and that's just going to give me a total of 11. Right? So in this case, 15 can't go into 11, so we're just going to do is bring down that 0 here. So now we're going to have 110. So for 110, I need to figure out how many times does 15 go into 110. I know that 7 times 15 will give me 105. So I can just say 110 minus 105, and that's just going to give me 5. And like I said, it's going to be a continuous pattern. So let's do this one more time. Bring down that 0. That's going to give me 50. So I need to figure out how many times does 15 go into 50. Well, I know that 15 times 3 will give me 45. And 50 minus 45 would just give me 5. Like I said, it's going to be a continuous pattern. There's never going to be a whole answer here. So we're just going to leave it as 0.17 because we're just running to the hundreds place.